Hi, good evening, and welcome to our next installment on the Ask the Vets Client Education Series. I'm Dr. Philip with the Animal Medical Center, and today I'll be talking about animal behavior. So what is animal behavior? It's ethology, so how an animal interacts with and in their own environment. Basically, why do they do what they do? This is a question that's plagued a lot of human minds, and we have a lot of fun thinking about it. And just a fair warning, this presentation will have quite a bit of memes, which I find represent animals quite well. So why are we talking about animal behavior? It's often overlooked. It shouldn't be. In the UK, when they're thinking of animal welfare, behavior is definitely one of the 5 freedoms. So in the UK, when they're talking about animal husbandry and welfare, especially in food production, they wanted to consider the 5 freedoms, and that is freedom from hunger or thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, which a lot of veterinary medicine is about, but also freedom to express normal behavior, as well as freedom from fear and distress. We often forget about freedom to express normal behavior, even as client-owned animals. Like this meme is suggesting, your dog has unlimited food, water, shelter, and love, and you open the door and the dog runs, and you don't know why. It's the normal behavior for the animal to want to explore. And that's something we have to keep in mind when treating and interacting with our pets. So it's important to understand normal behavior. So dogs have been bred from wolves. So if we understand a lot of the normal biology and behavior of wolves, we can have an understanding of our pet animals with some differences, as you can see. So the main thing is dogs, they really desire exploration. So they want to go, they want to adventure, they want to go out. So you have to kind of understand that, and you have to kind of cater to that in a sense. They have exceptional sense of smell and hearing compared to us, 100 times better smell. Their hearing range is much higher, so we have to think about that. Like certain frequencies, like lights that we don't even hear, can be bothersome and can irritate certain animals. So we have to keep in mind that for stress in animals. They're typically loosely associated in packs or in pairs, so there's often a hierarchy with alpha and beta. Some behaviors indicate that you become a member of the pack of your dog, and so if you become the alpha in that pack, then the other dogs will kind of not fight as much, and they'll look to you for guidance. Dogs tend to sleep a lot, especially puppies, so 95% of the time they're sleeping. So some people are concerned when they say, oh, my puppy just sleeps all day. It's quite normal. It's part of their developmental process. And once again, they're intensely bred for domestication. So we have to keep that in mind. So like the pug says, I didn't choose the pug life chose me, meaning people kind of made pugs exist. So a lot of their behaviors have been selected and bred for that. So that's something to keep in mind with breed differences as well. So normal feline behavior. Cats are quite different than our dog friends. They tend to be more eye driven, so they are hunters. They're less like scavengers like some dogs can be. So they have very acute vision. They don't see colors as well as humans, but they can see movement and track very fast. Anyone who ever plays with a cat will know. They're very sensitive to pheromones, so these are like chemicals that are produced on certain glands. So you'll see cats that like to be rubbed by their cheek, in front of their ear, and their tail base. That's where a lot of the pheromones are released, and so they're kind of rubbing their scent on you, and it kind of appeases them. With that being said, cats also do a lot of grooming, so seeing hairballs and coughing up is kind of part of their normal routine to get rid of all the pests on their skin and keep themselves clean. Cats also sometimes will mark, especially male cats, and that's something that we try to change the behavior a little bit to be housed inside. And that being said, cats can also be grouped housed, so you can have many cats in a household, or they can be isolationist. and that can vary from cat to cat. It's easier to introduce younger cats together, and they tend to be more cooperative when they're younger. When you introduce a kitten rather than two adult cats, can be a little bit more tricky on that introduction. They also have this peaceful nocturnal gathering where they all come together and just kind of watch at each other. It's quite interesting, but that's normal cat behavior once again. And stalking and hunting is genetic, but killing and eating are learned. Usually in the first weeks of a kitten's life, they'll understand that prey, the mother will kill a prey and bring it for the kittens in the wild, and that translates into domestic species as well. But that instinct to stalk and hunt is kind of inbred in cats. They're also seasonally polyestrous, meaning that they go into heat multiple times, and they can have heat after heat during a certain time of the year, and they're induced ovulators, so they won't ovulate, so that won't knock them out of heat until they are mated by a male tom. So sometimes you'll hear a lot of cats crying and moaning around the same time because it's kind of like kitten season. Right, normal puppy development. So this is important to understand. What I really want to stress with this is the period that they're going through. This transitioning tends to be the period where there's a lot of change, and that can affect behavior, and that's how we can select behavior that we want versus behavior we don't want. A lot of that is ingrained quite young in a puppy's life. So the fetal period is basically, you know, before birth, explanatory. The neonatal period is a lot of rooting behavior, so a little bit of looking for the milk and stuff like that, a little bit of movement. The transitional period is important because that's when they get start using their senses, so the sense of sound, sight, and all of that starts developing around that time. And then the socialization period, so that's, you know, the first 3 months of a dog's life, is when they need to be exposed to different things so they don't get afraid of it. So it's kind of, you know, expanding their vocabulary in a sense. So it's important to provide safe experiences for them. And I want to stress that the fear period is during this time, and this is the time when a lot of animals get vaccines or get bought and sold or get transitioned from house to house. And the fear period is this period of time when certain things can leave a lasting impression on them, and so they can develop a fear for something as a puppy that can translate late into life. So I just wanted to stress that. So that's when they see fear, and that can be quite ingrained. So the best way to stop behavior problems is to prevent it. So there are a couple things that we can do right away to prevent behavior problems from being established. One is socialization, as I mentioned earlier. So you expose your puppy to a variety of people, genders, races, you know, heights, all those things will allow the puppy not to have, you know, crazy aggression or crazy fear to those things later in life. You also want to puppy proof, so that means you don't want to set up your puppy for failure. So if they chew a lot of stuff like shoes and stuff that you really want, it's kind of their normal behavior to be to teeth and to explore. So you want to move your shoes away so you're not punishing your puppy every time they start chewing your expensive shoes. So you don't want to set them up for failure. You want to walk them off your property when they're old enough. This will allow them to explore, and also it will reduce a lot of fear and anxiety that can build up in animals. It reduces reactivity and increases socialization, so they're less triggered, so to speak. And it's important to ignore unwanted behavior. So if they do something you don't like, you don't give them attention, you just ignore them, and reward desired behavior. And it's important to be quite consistent with that. So similar to raising a child. All right, so now I'll talk quickly about some training tools that you can use. So there, the big three that you might see a lot in training is counter conditioning, systemic desensitization, and response substitution. So these are kind of a big word, so to speak. But counter conditioning is basically changing the emotional state. So what would make someone fearful or aggressive, you'll make happy, and that's done through the reward pathway. Systemic desensitization is basically slowly introducing something that they're averse to at small doses, so they don't get triggered when it comes bigger. So it's kind of getting used to something like stepping into a shower, a cold shower. You put your hand in first and then your shoulder, and you're basically systemically desensitizing yourself to the shock of the cold. So I have this meme about thunder, dogs that really hate the sound of thunder and then they freak out. One way of using systematic desensitization is you can record thunder, play it very quietly for the animals, and then you slowly increase the volume, and they kind of get used to it. That's the basic idea. Response substitution is you want a different behavior from a stimulation. So like when you come home, the dog jumps on you and you want the dog to sit instead. So that would be response substitution. So those are the tools that we kind of use to get the desired behavior in our pets and in animals. So these tools are all kind of based on operant conditioning by reinforcing positive behavior and ignoring negative behavior. And there's different terms. I'll go over this quickly, but the slide is here. So there's positive reinforcement, so where you're applying something to reinforce a behavior. Negative reinforcement, you're removing something to enhance a behavior. Positive punishment, you're applying something so you don't want the behavior. And negative punishment, you're removing something because you don't want the behavior. Summary, the best way to do things is through positive reinforcement. It's the best way to get a desired behavior. Positive punishment has been shown not to be very effective. It's very difficult because timing is critical and there's a lot of connections that people miss. So I would stress on capturing a behavior. So if a dog does something you like or a behavior or mannerism you want, you reward them when they do that. And that's the best way to do it. And you want to be steady and consistent and not move too fast. All right, I'll talk about some common puppy problems quickly to kind of go over some examples of how to do, behavior modification and whatnot to get desired behavior in your pet. So jumping up is common. The best way is to step back and then you teach the appropriate behavior. So they get rewarded when they jump on you and you touch them. They like the touching and the contact. So if they jump up on you, you kind of step back so they don't get closer to you and you kind of ignore them. And that's one way to stop them from jumping or turning around. You can also teach an appropriate behavior, so you tell them to sit as soon as you see them, and then you reward them for sitting. So when you come, they'll come and sit instead of coming and jumping on you. Crate training, basically you want it to be a positive experience in the crate. So this is counter conditioning. So you would put treats or you feed them in the crate, and you want to make sure the crate is comfortable and the right size, and it's not a punishment. You don't put them in the crate when you're punishing them. It's almost like a reward, so it's easier for them to go in. And then house training, you want to take them out often, and when they urinate, you want to reward them. A lot of people will take the puppy out, and as soon as they pee or poop, they go back in, and that's almost like a punishment for peeing and pooping because they want to be outside. So it's important to let them have a little bit more time outside after they do the behavior. After they urinate or defecate, so that they're happy and you're rewarding them for doing it outside. Take them out frequently so you avoid punishing them if they're inside, and you're setting them up for failure. Separation anxiety is quite common, so you start with basically systematic desensitization. So short absences, then you come back, you go away before they start barking, you come back, so they slowly get used to you going away. And important to kind of ignore your dog before you're going, so you don't want to have all these cues that kind of build up the anxiety in them. So you try to get rid of those cues one by one. Just to continue a little bit on some problems like handling and restraint. So some animals don't want you to touch their feet or touch their ears, and that's really important for us when we're medicating or putting drops in the eye. It's good to do some counter conditioning, so you give them treats when you're doing stuff like that so they enjoy the experience. Also, you can do systematic desensitization, so you just touch them barely a little bit and stop, touch them a little bit and stop. Before they get upset or angry, just do a little bit of light touching so they kind of get used to it and don't have all that anxiety that builds up. Pilling as well, because you have to medicate your animals, and a lot of clients will just stop giving medication because it's too difficult or it's stressing out the dog or cat. So one trick is that you can try the procedure with a peanut butter or a treat. So you open your mouth, you're pretending like you're shoving a pill in their mouth, but it's actually peanut butter or a treat. So they kind of like it and they get used to that that process as well. Off or leave it or drop it. So often you can put a treat in your hand. You put your hand by them and they'll try to get at it, but as soon as they stop trying to get at it, then you offer it. But you'll say off. So basically, they realize if they're not very aggressive or trying to pick up everything, they'll get the reward. So for a lot of this behavior modification, training is key. So training, like obedience training, having basic commands like sit and stay, is really important to have, so you can have a common vocabulary with your dog and you can communicate that way. So that's important for the owner and for the pet. So you both have to train yourselves, because we're guilty of cutting corners and then that can sabotage our pet. It's also important to understand what is normal. So if you can easily put your pet in what we call a conflict mode or conflict behavior, where they know they'll get punished, but they don't know what the right thing is to do. But their behavior is so strong and their desire is so strong they can't help it, kind of like an addict in a sense. And so we have to understand how we can work with that, and you have to work slowly and carefully with them. Also, it's important to check for medical conditions. So a lot of behavior like urine spraying or marking can be signs of disease or stress. So it's important to talk to your veterinarian and make sure we rule out all treatable diseases. That could be the condition that's causing the unwanted behavior, or aggression can be from signs of pain and stuff like that. So it's important that they get a good checkup to rule that out. I just want to stress neutering and such can reduce a lot of unwanted behaviors like roaming, inter-dog aggression, urine marking when they destroy things as well, trying to get to a female. All of that can be stemmed with the routine healthy neutering and spaying. In some really complicated cases, yeah, some medications can be prescribed to help modify behavior. So there is, Prozac and stuff for really stressy animals that are in a really difficult situation. But after, intense consultation, would we ever pursue stuff like that? So I just want to thank you for your attention. I know it's a lot of information, and it's really hard to kind of talk about behavior in a short presentation, but feel free to consult your veterinarian or any of us here at Animal Medical Center. We can have consults talking about behavior, because it is something that requires a lot of work and a lot of consultation to get right, and we really want you to have a great relationship with your pet, and we want to reduce the anxiety, because a healthy pet means a happy pet, and a happy pet doesn't have conflict behavior. So thank you, and feel free to leave any questions. I'll be happy to answer them next week. We'll have a live session next week, so you can ask them live, or you can send them in here on Facebook or WhatsApp them or whatever. Just contact us and we'll try to address any issues you have.